9. I married an Amish man I had met once. He already knew my mother's secret. The kerosene lamp was still burning when I woke, low and tired, like it had been waiting through the night just for me. The air in the kitchen was cold enough to sting my fingers as I stood barefoot on the pine floor, listening to the wood settle in slow cracks. A blue quilt sat folded on the chair beside the table, too neat to feel forgotten, too steady to feel new. My wedding ring pressed against my skin in a way I did not understand yet. No one had told me why everything felt decided before I arrived in this house. What I am about to tell you, I have never said aloud. I am Mary Amish home, speaking quietly from a place I never expected to stand in. This is this channel, where I share what silence leaves behind. If you are listening in your own quiet night, subscribe and stay with me. Tell me, have you ever walked into a life that felt already prepared for you? The kettle was not boiling, but I could hear heat in it, small rising sound under metal. My hands stayed still on the edge of the sink. Cold water had already soaked into my sleeves from earlier washing, but I did not remember starting. Jonas moved behind me without speaking, stepped soft on the pine boards, like he knew exactly where not to break the quiet. The blue quilt remained on the chair, unchanged, as if it had been placed there long before I ever opened my eyes in this room. I felt watched by something that was not a person. The lamp flame bent slightly when I turned my head. That small movement made the shadows shift across the table like slow breath. Jonas poured water into a tin basin, steady and unhurried, not looking at me. His silence was not cold, but it was full of something I could not name. I remember thinking I should have known more about this house before I came into it. But no one had told me anything that felt complete. Even my name sounded different here, as if it belonged to someone else first. In my community, we spoke of Ordnung as the shape of living, way a river keeps its edges without needing to explain them. No one called it punishment. It was simply the way life held itself together. Jonas carried that same stillness, what some called Gelassenheit, a quiet acceptance that did not ask for explanation. I used to think silence meant nothing. Now I was learning it could mean too much. And if you are listening now, there are silences in every life that feel like answers before the question is Spock. The blue quilt caught my attention again when I passed it, stitches uneven in one corner, as if the hands that made it had been interrupted. I reached out and touched it without thinking. It was warmer than the room. There are moments when fabric holds more memory than words ever could. Have you ever held something that felt like it belonged to someone else's unfinished story? I am Mary Amish home, and this is this channel where I speak of what was never spoken. Stay with me if you wish to understand what silence leaves behind. Blue quilt caught my attention again when I passed it, its stitches uneven in one corner, as if the hands that made it had been interrupted. I reached out and touched it without thinking. It was warmer than the room. There are moments when fabric holds more memory than words ever could. Have you ever held something that felt like it belonged to someone else's unfinished story? I am Mary Amish home, and this is this channel where I speak of what was never spoken. Stay with me if you wish to understand what silence leaves behind. The blue quilt caught my attention again when I passed it, its stitches uneven in one corner, as if the hands that made it had been interrupted. I reached out and touched it without thinking. It was warmer than the room. There are moments when fabric holds more memory than words ever could. Have you ever held something that felt like it belonged to someone else's unfinished story? I am Mary Amish home, and this is this channel where I speak of what was never spoken. Stay with me if you wish to understand what silence leaves behind. There was another woman I once knew, years ago, who married into a family where no questions were asked. She told me once that it felt like stepping into a sentence already written halfway through. No one was cruel to her. No one explained anything either. In time, she stopped asking. That is how silence grows comfortable in a place. You do not notice when it begins to speak for everyone. And I began to wonder if love and obligation ever truly live apart in the same home. Jonas lifted the blue quilt without looking at me. He folded it once, then again slowly, as if remembering something with his hands. Room seemed to hold its breath while he did it. I stood still, waiting for a sentence that did not come. When he placed it back on the chair, his fingers lingered for just a moment longer than needed. Then he turned toward the door, but did not step out yet. And in that pause, I realized he had never once asked me what I knew about my own mother. The door did not close right away. It stayed half open, letting in a thin line of cold air from the barn side of the yard. The blue quilt was still on the chair, but now it looked heavier, as if it had gathered the silence from the room into its folds. I kept my hands at my sides, not trusting them to move. Jonas stood near the doorway without turning fully back to me. The kerosene lamp made his shadow stretch long across the floorboards. I remember thinking the house had learned how to hold its breath. He spoke without raising his voice. Not like someone confessing. More like someone placing a cup on a table that had already been waiting. I knew your mother before I knew you. The words did not break the room, settled into it. There was no anger in his face, no urgency in his hands, only a stillness that felt older than the marriage itself. I did not move. The floorboards under my feet felt farther away than they should have. Jonas finally turned slightly, not enough to meet my eyes fully. He said nothing more for a long time. That silence was part of what he meant. I understood that later. Not everything is spoken to be heard in the moment. Some things are only meant to arrive slowly, like winter light through a small window. My mother, Martha, had once asked for something that was not meant for me to hear. Jonas told me this carefully, as if even the memory needed permission to exist. It was not a request of shame. It was a request of protection. Something in the past had pressed too close to our family, and she had chosen silence instead of explanation. He had agreed to carry that silence forward, without knowing where it would lead. And I had become part of what followed. The marriage did not begin when I arrived. It had already begun long before that morning, before my footsteps on the pine floor, before my name was spoken in this house. It was shaped quietly, in conversations I was never part of, between people who understood consequences more than feelings. I realized then I had not been brought here as a stranger. I had been carried forward from something unfinished. Both things can be true at once. A life can be chosen and still feel like a burden. A promise can be protection and still feel like silence. I looked at the blue quilt again, and it no longer felt like decoration. It felt like record keeping in thread, as if every stitch was a decision no one wanted to say aloud. There are truths that do not arrive with clarity. They arrive with weight instead. I am Mary Amish Home, and this is this channel where I speak what was never spoken in my home. If you are listening, I wonder something gently. If someone protected you by keeping part of your story hidden, would you still want to know every detail, even if it changed how you stood in your own life? Or would you let the silence stay where it was placed? The lamp flickered once as I said nothing in return. I picked up the blue quilt again. Its fabric felt the same as it had in the morning. I did not. Something in me had shifted without sound. Jonas had already turned away now, walking out into the cold yard, leaving the door open behind him for just a moment before it settled back into frame. Kerosene lamp bent its flame the same way it had when I first woke, as if it remembered me before I remembered myself. And I finally understood that some mornings do not begin. The door clicked softly this time. Not slammed, not closed with certainty. Just a small sound that felt like a decision made too late to undo. Cold air still lingered near the threshold, brushing my ankles as I stood there holding the blue quilt again. Jonas had moved farther out into the yard now, only his shape visible through the thin kitchen window. The kerosene lamp hissed once, then steadied, as if it did not want to interrupt what had just been said. I sat down without meaning to. The chair felt lower than I remembered, as if the room had shifted while I was not looking. Jonas did not return. His words stayed behind like dust that cannot be swept in a single motion. I knew your mother before I knew you. It repeated in me without sound. Not louder, just deeper each time it passed through my thoughts. There was no anger I could hold, only the strange weight of being included in something I never asked to join. My mother's face came back to me in fragments, her hands always wet, always careful with water as if it carried memory. The way she would stop speaking when someone asked about the winter before I was born. Jonas had said her name like it belonged in his past already arranged, not borrowed, not new, arranged. That word did not come from him, it rose in my mind anyway, as if the house itself had been holding it until now. My mother's face came back to me in fragments, her hands always wet, always careful with water as if it carried memory. The way she would stop speaking when someone asked about the winter before I was born. Jonas had said her name like it belonged in his past already arranged, not borrowed, not new, arranged. That word did not come from him, but it rose in my mind anyway, as if the house itself had been holding it until now. I began to understand it slowly, in the way dawn enters a room without announcing itself. This marriage was not built on meeting once. It was built on something earlier, something I had never been told was still alive. A promise carried forward quietly between adults who believed silence was safer than explanation. No one asked if I would agree, because the agreement had already been made in another time. I was only the part that arrived later, and I did not know whether that made me chosen or placed. Both things are true. I was not deceived, yet I did not know. I was not forced, yet I did not choose the beginning. The blue quilt lay across my lap now, heavier than before, as if it had taken on the shape of what I could not say aloud. In my community, silence was sometimes called respect. I was learning it could also become a way of carrying decisions too heavy for one voice alone. Neither Jonas nor my mother felt like villains in this moment, only people trying to keep something from breaking. I am Mary Amish home, speaking quietly from a life that was already in motion before I understood its direction. If you are still here with me, I want to ask something gently into this silence. If a truth was kept from you because someone believed it would protect your heart, would you still call it protection once you knew it fully? Or would it change shape the moment it became yours to carry? The lamp flickered as I waited for an answer that did not come. I folded the blue quilt the way Jonas had folded it, once, then again. My hands remembered the motion more easily than my mind remembered the reason. Outside, the yard was still. Barns stood in the distance like it had always been there, watching without judgment. The air inside the kitchen felt less like waiting now, and more like something that had already happened and was only now finishing its echo. I stood again, slowly, and placed the quilt back on the chair where it had always been waiting. The kerosene lamp burned the same low gold it had when I first woke, bending gently in the glass like a memory trying not to disappear. And I understood at last that I had not arrived late to this life. I had arrived exactly when I was always meant to be already inside it.